presentation on Eternal Return, the inspiration and creation of what went into this piece. So thank you, Kate, for the warm welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. It's incredible to see all the support, and so sweet to be able to join us. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. I met Peter in 2013 when he was first building Eternal Return. He was in his second year of building Eternal Return, and I had been quite amazed at all his work he'd done previously.
Wait. That's good. You're good.
Good. Thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, in 2013, I met Peter Hudson. He was going on to his second year of building this. I had been a huge fan of his pieces in the past. I had seen them at Burning Man. I saw them at the Exploratorium. I also worked in the same studio alongside another artist. And I went into the studio and I saw his pieces, these 30-foot zoetropes. I had no clue what they were. They were art. I knew they moved, so they were kinetic sculptures, yes. But was this engineering, was this science, and what went into this that made it so absolutely incredible? So in 2013, I finally grew the courage to go ask Peter Hudson if I could join his crew of volunteers. I was very intimidating because he's really scary. I don't know why, but I was really intimidating. I mean, you see these 30-foot sculptures and you're like, what? Like, who is this man that creates these things? So I asked him, and obviously he said yes with a huge smile and amazing contagious laugh that he has. So I joined his team in 2013, and I was one of what ended up being 145 volunteers to make this piece. We brought it to Burning Man in 2014, and yeah, 145 of us helped create it. I also led fundraising in its second year, and we fundraised over $200,000 4 years ago now, wanting to just learn about a new art form, and I've been incredible. My life's changed completely. So I'm honored to be here today. Thank you. I'm also honored and want to thank the Walt Disney Family Museum for having us. It's a really great opportunity, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we're here at a museum that's dedicated to Walt Disney as a human and to his family. Walt Disney and Peter have a lot in common, which I've come to find out. I think that the biggest thing is that they both were dreamers, or Peter is a dreamer, Walt was a dreamer, and they both believe in the impossible. They're both tinkerers, creators, innovators, pushing the limits beyond technology, and really at the core of it, they're artists. And I think that the most beautiful art form that they both had is that they use their imagination and bring that to life. They have these crazy characters in their head that they bring to life through the art form of animation. Walt did that in so many films that we're all familiar with. Peter does that through stroboscopic zoetropes. If you don't know what that is, you'll learn today. I only recently was able to fully say stroboscopic zoetrope. They also bring together hundreds of people. Walt used hundreds of animators and illustrators to perfect his film. Peter uses hundreds of animators, a lot of people in the audience as well, maybe just one animator, but hundreds of people as well, ranging from animators to technicians to engineers, who you'll hear both from today, to people like gold leafing. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's absolutely incredible the work that's done today, and I'm really happy for you guys to get an introduction to that. For those who are not as familiar with his work, here's a quick clip that'll give you an introduction.
Oh, hi there. My name's Peter Hudson. I'm just playing with my 2000.
Known as The Swimmers in 2002, Deeper the Divers in 2004, Boris, The Monkeys in 2007, Tantalus, The American Dream in 2008, Charon, The Skeletons in 2011, and Eternal Return, which we built in 2014. Eternal Return was one of the most dynamic and difficult pieces that Peter and the whole crew has built to date, so you're in for a very exciting show today. These images are beautiful and they bring to light a lot of what's in there. However, the real magic lies behind the moving piece. It's pretty hard to videotape these because of the lights and the strobes, which you'll learn about. But the animation you can see is a woman running up through the center cylinder and diving back, coming around. So here to actually tell you about the whole entire creation, inspiration behind this, is the man, the myth, and the legend.
Thank you all for coming here. Thank you. A lot of people come up to me and they ask me, what do I do? And the answer is whatever it takes, really. I think at the core, I'm telling you, very short story, but I'm a storyteller. And I'm going to tell you the story right now of the 2-year odyssey of bringing this behemoth to life. So really when I start bringing in all these other people, I realize that I'm a lot like a film director. And so I'm directing all of these other people. And I say that I'm the director of the shortest but tallest 3D animation shorts. Realized as 3D stroboscopic zoetrope, so that's a mouthful. Yeah, shortest, 3 seconds, tallest, 32 feet. So that's what I do. And how do I do that? Here's a road map that was made. Warren made this, but I didn't really. I wish I had this before I started making it. This was done retroactively. I came in here. So, anyways, this is a road map of what it takes to do this. We'll get into this. But how did I get started doing this? I was a child. I was really into building things and tinkering, and me and my brother used to do little animation shorts, director sets, building things. My dad, who's right back there, hi Mom and Dad. I was just always building things, and more likely taking things apart and just figuring out how they work. But I was always just really fascinated with how things work and making things. So that's how I got into this initially. And then let's fast forward several years. Oh wait, I wanted to show you that. I found that when I found this after I had built deeper, the divers, and that was in my hand, and I'm going, like I'm thinking, oh, you think? So then I started working at the San Francisco Opera as a stagehand in 1986, and just I learned all of these skills backstage, and I really didn't know until I started making my own art what I had learned. And so I'm still a stagehand. I've been a stagehand for 30 years now. And then after that, I went to this crazy thing out in the desert. I was dragged out there by Sean. and I really had no idea what was going on out there, but I was just absolutely blown away. And one of the pieces that really spoke to me was this. It was a life-size submarine breaching up out of the desert floor. It's like a water with the idea that you could swim underneath that. This was really super compelling to me. And I was fascinated by that, and I felt like I had gained so much from the experience out there that I wanted to give back. And taking this theme, I felt like I wanted to dive in, become immersed in this culture, in this community, and this was what I came up with the following year. And a bunch of my friends and I brought this out there and stuck it in the ground, and it was really resonated with a lot of people. And I was really happy with doing that, but I thought, well, what am I going to do next? How can I bring this to the next level, or animate it, let's say? And taking some of the skills that I learned at the opera, I built my very first Zoetrope in 2002, and I didn't even know if it was going to work or not. It was like, we threw all these things, and I didn't even know if the strobes were going to sync right or anything, but it did work, and that's a monster was created. So, what is it we go back to Zoetrope? The core of the word zoetrope means zoa means life, and tropos means turning in Greek, and it's turning life or wheel of life. And so that brings us to the Bhava Chakra. Is that how you say it? That's how I say it. This is the Sanskrit word for the samsara, which is about the recurring life and the theme that things that happen over and over again, the cyclical nature of life. And zoetropes are really so perfectly made for telling that story. And there's so many stories that can be told, that I have told, and that I want to tell, that are based on this recurrence. So people have seen my other work. A lot of it's very serious, dreary, dark death, and Sisyphean struggle, and horrible things in life. And then this one, I think we all kind of, this has become very relevant again, Tantalus, the American dream or not. I think a lot of us can identify with this feeling right now. All my pieces had kind of dark themes and serious themes to them. And I wanted to tell another story that was more about the exuberance of life and joy and fantasy. And so I wanted to tell a different story with my next piece. And thinking about those other themes, I came across the concept of the eternal return, which is it's explored in so many different cultures. It's like in ancient Aztec and Egyptian and Greek philosophy. And Nietzsche over here, he did a whole dissertation on it. I'm not going to get into that. But even Battlestar Galactica, the new Battlestar Galactica, was based on this theme that anything that's happened in the past will happen again. It could be happening right now. This moment right now that we're sitting here could be happening somewhere, another universe at the same time as now. That if the world is truly infinite, that's a possibility, isn't it? So this could be happening. Someone else is giving this talk right now to your doppelgangers. So anyways, we're taking that concept of like very ethereal, like, okay, what is that physically? That's a good point. Like, how do I take that metaphysical idea out of my brain and into your world? Well, let's go back to this thing. Okay, so I'm just at the very beginning of there. I'm not going to talk about all of this. That would take days. Maybe come back next week. But concept development is the first thing. Okay, how do I take that concept and turn that into a physical thing? So the first thing I went back to this piece I did in 2004, where they had these divers coming out of nowhere and going into the ground. But I wanted to do something to give it more dimension, have them like coming out, and using that idea of this like joyful exuberance of like say like when you dive off a diving board and then you can't wait to get back up and get back on a diving board. Like I wanted to celebrate that rather than having this curious Josephine having to do this horrible thing over and over, that you get to do it over and over. And I use this sort of as an idea board, and so I wanted to do 3 separate movements of someone climbing up this central tower, taking this backflip off, and the idea was that they would catch a trapeze and swing back into it, so there'd be a lot longer motion. It's like, that's 3 motions, and it became a little bit hard to do, so this was my first conceptual drawing of it. And for technical reasons, the center core would only let me get 14 bodies around this center piece there, and that's how many frames. I hope you all understand how animation works, but that's a lot of motion to tell in only 14 frames. So looking at it from the top, you can get an idea of like when they come together, I just can't get them closer than that. So to try to tell the story in 14 frames was a problem. Well, what do I do? Bring out the big guns. So I need to talk to another 3D Zoetrope artist. A what? It just so happens that I've met Warren Trezevant, who worked at Pixar, and he did the Toy Story Zoetrope. And I brought him on board to help me figure this out. So Warren, thank you.
So like Peter mentioned, I was a character animator at Pixar Animation Studios since 1995, but I've also been going to Burning Man since 1997. So I had actually seen Peter's work as an artist, through the ages. And I was first introduced to stroboscopic zoetropes in 2001, and it kind of meshed this kind of computer idea of working in the computer with the idea of Burning Man, where you're actually building physical things. And so I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to build this while I was at Pixar. And it was created by doing all of the animation in the computer and then 3D printing each of those frames out and putting it on this 8-foot disc. But the idea is exactly the same. It's a disc that spins, and when it's at the right speed, it throws a strobe light on it, and every strobe flash kind of freezes the image in your mind. And those sequence of strobe flashes then kind of create the illusion of movement that you perceive. And this is exactly how film works. When you're, instead of a spinning disc, you're seeing a reel through a projector, and you're seeing images that are captured on film versus statues. But the idea is the same, is to get these sequential static images playing and to show you motion. So I had the good fortune of meeting Peter in
Peter Hudson's new Zoetrope. Yeah, and so I met him earlier in 2007, and he sent me an email and said, hey, you need any help? Oh yeah, I'll let you help me. So I let Warren, so I was going to animate these, I don't know how, but then Warren came in, and there's that's another story.
Yeah, that's
a whole other story, but he came in and did the meticulous animating of these, so they just flew and be perfect.
Yeah, it was just wonderful working with Peter, working with the crew, and once this project finished, Peter has many ideas, so he was like running ideas by us, and he came across the challenge that he was having with Eternal Return of how do you get this 3-part story to be told in 14 frames. So again, just to kind of, you're not looking at a strip of film, it's a disc, and each wedge represents 1 frame. So if you take a circle and you divide it by how many frames you have, and that's how much you have to tell your story. And then when you spin it, what the audience sees is a looped story, kind of all the frames sequencing together to tell this little story. And we were trying really hard to figure out, like, how do we tell all those complex things in 14 frames? Most of Peter's other zoetropes were 20 frames long, so we're actually working with fewer frames than we ever had before.
A lot more motion.
A lot more motion, a lot fewer frames, so it was tricky. But we realized that if you kind of take that loop story and actually take 2 loops to tell your story, you can take 1 loop of the zoetrope and divide the space in half and use 14 frames to tell 1 half of the story. And then on the second loop,
Well, luckily they're moving through space.
Luckily they're moving through space.
So they weren't going to block each other.
yeah,
They're always-
you can tell the other half. So now all of a sudden, we have 28 frames to tell our story, which is longer than what Peter had. Unfortunately, this means that we had, 30% more work.
28 frames.
But the good news
Full
was,
bodies, not like little partial bodies or anything.
but the good news was, is we had figured out a way to tell the story that Peter wanted to tell. And it was by having 2 poses on every frame and having them tell the story over 2 cycles of the zoetrope. So to see if this idea would actually work, I went back to the computer, I grabbed a previs model, just this random figure that I had, and I created this little animation where I kind of tested out the idea. So what you're seeing here is each frame with 2 poses on it. And we realized that we were going to be able to achieve Peter's vision of her coming out from the center, coming in, and then doing that loop. And when you tie all of these together, we got this animation. And so we realized, yeah, we can actually do it. And so I showed it to Peter.
And yeah, so the first thing is he put that ring there just as a point of reference, and I'm like, oh my God, I love that ring, because I was going to have this crazy trapeze thing. I didn't even know I was going to do it. But he put that ring there, so that balanced out the piece and everything, so that was great. But the issue here was that this flying is wonderful and swinging around is great, but then when he hit the middle, it was like this slow climb. It ruined the whole cadence of the piece. So I just thought, well, man, I really don't like that. How can we smooth that out more? And then Warren, genius that he is, came up with this brilliant idea.
Well, we did some exploration and kind of referred to like parkour, which is urban gymnastics, and thought of like what kind of moves would fit into this and kind of maintain this momentum and the speed of it. And so we looked at this notion of kind of running up the wall and doing the backflip versus climbing. So we thought that that had some value to it. So then I took it and put all 28 frames into a single story.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what it was.
So it really took because what she really wants to do is fly. She doesn't want to climb up there. So what he really did, he only made that to like, what, 4 or 5 frames? So
Yeah.
she got to fly longer and climb less. And it was such a beautiful motion.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
So it was good to know that the story could be told. Now, but how are you going to make that, Peter?
Oh, we're not about to make that? Okay, so you notice there's just like this shake weight in the middle there. That's not really I'm just like, okay, now we know what the animation is, but now I've done this before, so I know that we're gonna have to make this structure. But how am I gonna even make, what is it gonna look like? I don't want it to look like other things, I wanna make it look like something new. So now we're getting into the design of the structure that's gonna hold 28 bodies flying through space, and it's dangerous at one point, but then it's like, so this was my first idea. I came up with this idea of this, I wanted something very feminine, and that was something I didn't tell you about, is that like all my other pieces have been male and masculine, so I wanted to do a much more feminine piece, so I wanted to do this very voluptuous kind of tower design that had a geodesic dome center to it, and was very beautiful, but It started having, so I made a stocky right back there. Made this little Barbie doll model with all the pieces, and this one's kind of fun. This guy get some ideas on how to make that. That's Jeff Stonepipe back there for drilling that thing. But then we made this model. So this was like a 3-foot tall model. I'm like, yeah, I love it. Let's make that. But the problem was, that's this tall. If you have to make that gigantic, you can't just, there's a lot of engineering and stuff involved in this. So that's when I called Allie here, who I met through Marco Cochran's, he was in the same studio as me, and his Celinda worked on with Marco Cochran. That's how I met Allie. So I brought in Allie and said, Allie, I want to make this. What do you think?
Yeah. My name is Ali, one of the co-founders of Rabu, an engineering company that specializes on large-scale art sculptures. The other co-founders here, Selena. Actually, Eternal Return was the first art sculpture that I worked on. That opened the gate for me to the creativity and imagination, and I fell in love with it. Super awesome. My background actually was pretty much lined up. With what Eternal Return needed. I worked on floating offshore wind turbines, which are gigantic platforms. I did the structural engineering for it, just like Eternal Return. They're both in harsh condition, and both are dynamic structure. One, the blade rotates to generate the power. The other one, people put the power in to make the ladies rotate.
Generate wind. He made wind generators. And I generate power from wind. I made things that generate wind.
Yeah. Right. Eternal Return to me, as an engineer, is a super exciting structure. It has a gear system, it has human power, it has this crazy rotating ladies rotating around. Very complex control system, programmable language control. So I was very honored to be part of that project. And since then, me and Peter have been great friends. So when I came into the picture, there were sketches, there was a prototype, as you saw, but the thing didn't exist in reality. My job was to bring this imagination to reality. And Eternal Return is not a 2-feet structure that is supposed to sit in a museum protected from the elements. This is a structure designed for a harsh environment, the desert. As a structural engineer, I had to think about these things, so I'm going to walk you through it. Eternal Return is a 2-3-story tall structure, right? It's huge. Also, it's in the middle of the desert, which we had to design it for 150 miles an hour wind. So let's think about that for a second. If you're going on the highway, 60 miles an hour, you put your hand out, see how much force it puts on your hand? Double that up. That's 150 miles an hour wind. Force on your structure. And not one, not two, 28 50-pound figures. Heather is 100 pounds, and that's half of the size of her. They're rotating in the air. There are a lot of loads that comes from it. They're going 30 RPM, which is about 20 miles an hour. I'm going to show you guys this little Barbie thing here to show you what that means. So when you start rotating something, it wants to go, right? As you rotate it faster, the impact is higher, so it wants to fly higher, and as the weight is high, the impact is still higher. So there are a lot of force that comes from these ladies to the structure. So also we have to design this structure that is easily assembled. It can get easily assembled and disassembled. So I have to think about the mechanical connection, nuts and bolts, and it could fit in the container and travel all around the world. Also, I have to make sure it doesn't tip over. I have to also make sure that it doesn't fatigue. Fatigue is like, imagine a paper clip that goes through a lot of dynamic. It breaks at the end, right? So I have to make sure that doesn't happen to the structure. In a nutshell, my job is to make sure that this doesn't kill anyone. So this is the sketch that I got from Peter. Right off the bat, I knew there were a few problems that I thought that I should resolve before we move on. One of the problems that that I saw was that because of all the motion of the ladies, right, at the top, I was worried about the prying and squeezing, meaning that these guys would start wobbling a lot.
That's like
So,
22 feet, right?
22
That's
feet
foot
diameter, right? It's pretty big, right? So the first thing we did, we connected these guys together. The second problem was this base section. I was worried about buckling. So imagine you have a can of Coke, you put a lot of force at the top, it would buckle. And Peter wasn't super in love with it. It was very labor intensive. So Peter, why don't you tell him?
Well, what happened, let's go back. So this piece right here, this was this whole geodesic center dome, and this was structural. And the engineers don't like it. They couldn't really model, he had a hard time modeling it. And because I wanted to fit that inside a truck, it could only be 7'6" diameter. It wasn't as voluptuous as I wanted it to be. So there was some other problems with it and all the curves, and it was gonna be hard to make. So I learned about elliptical hyperboloids right here. And the great thing about that is that as I was doing the studying for this, I could still get a curved look, but use straight members. So it was a lot more rigid, it has triangulation to it, so it wouldn't be tipping a lot. And so I kind of wanted to keep with that feminine idea, and I thought, well, what if we make it kind of like a genie bottle, you know? So it's kind of not bulb in the middle, kind of like this curved thing like that. So using the elliptical hyperboloid as a concept, I came up with this pencil sketch here, like, oh, how about this idea? How about if we did it like this, Allie? How would we do that? So he took my pencil sketch.
Yeah, so from here, I built my structural model. This model is strictly for doing calculation analysis. So I took this model, I applied the wind loads to it, you can see this purple dots, and I put the rotation, I put the masses
So
of
that
the
on
bodies.
the left's just for wind, right?
Yeah, this is just the wind.
This is rotation?
Yeah, that's this sign right here is the rotation. So we started doing analysis. I'm going to show you guys some of the problems that we faced and some of the simulation that how it looked. The first problem we had was the ring wasn't stiff enough, so we had to stiffen and make this member thicker. So with that, we solved the problem. The second problem was because of all the rotational stuff, we had the shaft was moving a lot. Also, you can see this top portion was wobbling a lot. So I brought this to Peter's attention because as an art engineer, I'm not supposed to mess with the artist's vision. So I come to him with this problem, and we fixed this problem by transferring the load to the sides and making it more stiff at the center.
The top of the...
Yeah, so which is the top section that you can see, that's what it looks like. So we solved all the problem. This is the final version that everything worked out. Let me just tell you guys what that means for a second. What number you're seeing here is called stress, which is the measure of the force. All you need to know is that it shouldn't go above 250. If it goes, it's dangerous, right? So, but the maximum number is 45. So relatively, blue is pretty much zero stress, and red gets more stress. So you can see these are the parts that you're getting most of the stress on your frames.
My head would be red right now.
Right. And that's the frames. And here I'm going to show you the plates, the stresses on them. You can see this top portion is getting most of the stresses, or the loads, if you will. And here's the sketch that I got from Peter after doing all the magic of engineering. This is what it came out to be. Here.
So so then we take that from his model, we worked with a CAD draftsman to come up with this drawing here. Pete Scheidel
He's here.
Hey Pete, how's it going? So then he had to draw this all up and figure out all these mechanical connections, like how all these things are going to go together and come apart. And then we got these drawings of how to build it, physically, every single piece, blueprints to make this thing. But then what do we do? So, we got a lot of other stuff to do. So we take those designs and we give those to a little Joe, I don't think he's here, and we start building the structure. And this is some of all the different parts we were talking about. We're talking about the drivetrain up there, the central tower with all the bearings, and the bottom pieces here. So this whole thing is getting made, and as we need the different parts, all these things are happening concurrently. And I don't know if we talked so much about the drive of these pieces, but all of my pieces are very interactive, and I want people to engage with them, and you gotta kind of figure out how to make it go. And we've done some pulling on ropes and bicycles and train pumper cars for other pieces. And this one I decided to do something different. I was like, that's something we do what we know how to do, let's do something different, make it more complicated. So, stalking is what I'm talking about. We decided to put 16 rowing machines around this thing. That's a lot of rowing machines. And then, so everyone would pull this thing, make it spin, and I came up with this drawing here, it was my idea. And then it got refined by Geo Humsey, and Sean's here somewhere. Sean Cunningham and Geo Humsey spent the rest of their lives on this. And it looks absolutely stunning and beautiful, but this whole thing's going on. At the same time, we have another crew working on the electronics. And this is like the electronics for control. We had a motor to back it up in case people couldn't get it going fast enough. And then there's all lighting, the effects lighting, and then ambient lighting, and all that stuff. So there's JoJo, Rich again. And then also, here's the whole crew that did all the electronics here. And we just don't have time for them to tell you the ordeals. And the whole thing, also, we have a whole solar array out there that we run. When we run all the power, it's all solar. And so, that's going on all at the same time. Then, we're figuring out, okay, now we got the tower figured out, we have the animation figured out. Now, how are we going to make 28 bodies? Okay, so Warren figured out, he made this, all those digital figures that he made, he did a digital representation of that, and every square on there is a foot. So there's all 28 frames, that's 28 positions all in one frame. And so then from that, he spit out these drawings. So every single position, we had a front and a side of every position. And just to make things more complicated, I like life casting and making bodies and having people work together and having a lot of crew work together to manifest these things. And that's a big part of my art, is I like it to be a very collaborative effort. So how am I going to get bodies into these positions to cast them? Oh. Very painfully. So I rigged up this whole system here, and we had Charlene and Heather, and I think I saw there they are right there. Great sports, because they had to be in these. So there's 28 bodies. Let's do the math. So each time we did, so we had to make this crazy rig to hold them in all these positions that we're putting against these drawings here. And they're sort of estimations, you know, and your body can't really sort of do, this is an extreme example, like that you couldn't hold that position that long. But anyways, we made this whole rig to get them in these positions, and then we started plastering over their bodies, but we could only do a quarter of their body at a time. So meant 4 times 28, 112, 112 sittings, not necessarily that many days, but a lot. So then we covered them with all these, men, we did these front and back halves and stuff. And then we, there's that mess there, Kathy. And there's the half a body. And then we got all these halves of bodies, so 56 halves of bodies, putting all together. So then we had 28 full bodies of these casts. And then at this point, we had to make sure that it fit the animation. So we had to somehow go, like before we start to the next step of making these fiberglass, making the positives from these molds, we had to do what, Warren? So Warren comes in back again with his amazing technology and helps me out.
Yeah, and Peter said it just right. Like, we had started with an idea, and we just wanted to see if that idea made it through this incredibly laborious process of making these casts. And so the best way to check it was to figure out how to get these casts into the computer so we can just animate them and make sure that everything is working how we want. So we used a piece of software that is called 123D Catch. It uses photogrammetry, and the idea is that you have an object and you take 60 photographs of it. You walk around and take these photographs and you send it up to the cloud, and the cloud converts it into a three-dimensional mesh.
Cloud?
The cloud, the magic interwebs.
It's a cloud. It's a cloud.
So then I pull down the file and it looks like this. So you can see Peter's studio. So I go through this and I delete out the stuff that's not there. And as I slowly peel the stuff away, what's left is the exact representation of the cast that was made inside the computer. So now I know exactly what the model ended up posing. The next thing I had to do was figuring out how this matched. And in order to do this, I had to know what the sizes of the women were. So we got measurements from Heather and Charlene, and I don't know if Phil's here, but he helped us get digital models of this inside the computer. So we knew exactly the sizes of the women that were supposed to go to each cast. And then I kind of made sure, I had to see how that worked with the original animation I'd done with the previous
Right, because that was a cartoon character that
Yeah.
didn't look like any person.
Yeah, and yeah.
Yes, we actually measured them, extensively measured them,
Yeah.
so we had all those measurements to make the model.
But the nice thing is once I had the casts, I could bring those in the computer, and then I would take each of the digital representations of the women and and pose them inside of the cast. So I knew exactly what the pose was going to look like. And then once I had those, I colored them gold, so I kind of knew that that was what the pose gave us. And then again, what I could do is then see how that compared to my original animation. And I went through and I kind of checked it, and I was like, okay, some of these frames didn't work, but if you animate them well, they did work. And it took a long time to just make sure that all the animation worked. Because again, if you're watching a movie, like you're watching Mickey Mouse, you don't want the ear to be drawn on one frame and then over here in another frame, because your eye just kind of catches it and pops it. So if you notice, there's one frame where like the leg pops out a little bit, and we noticed that that wasn't going to animate well. And so we chose about 3 or 4 pieces to kind of focus on, and we had to fix them.
Because those models were not going to go back under.
Yeah.
We already had our parties and dreams, those aren't doing work. We have to do it to that thing, we're not touching them.
So Andy and I went in and we had to solve parts of the cast, we had to fix things, and we had to line up the cast to make sure they animated well, and we had to kind of attach them. So thankfully, there's only like 3 or 4 of them, but we got them all done. Everything else animated really well. We confirmed it in the computer, and so we realized that this was it. So we knew we had a nice set of animatable casts, and I don't know, what's the date here? How much time do
June
we have left to do
18th, this had to be on the desert on August 18th.
Yeah.
So we had 2 months from this date to do what I'm about to tell you. That's a lot of work. So we have molds, we have the negatives. So from there, we have to make positives from those. And that means each one of these halves have to be sanded and filled, and all sanding and all the sand here. A lot of sanding and filling. And then sealing the insides of that, and then putting multiple layers of mold release on there, and then fiberglassing every one of each half, 50-something halves of these things, and putting armature. They all have armatures in them to attach them to the final structure. And then there's the armatures and stuff, so fiberglassing all those things. Then we put all the halves together, and then what we did is we filled them with foam, which makes them all stick together, makes them really strong. And then, funnest part, actually, this is the funnest part, is pulling all that plaster off of them to reveal these positives. And then we had 28 full bodies laying around, but you notice the seams are really bad here. Okay, back to Bondo and sanding and Bondo and sanding. So then we sanded all these things down, getting those things all refined, working, a lot of sanding. I didn't mention that. And you notice they didn't have feet or heads or hands. I had to make a lot of feet and heads and hands. Thank you, Karen. No, she's the expert. There she is right there. A lot of 4, 8, a lot, I can't do the math, a lot of them. So we've got all these things together, do all this work, so putting heads and all this stuff on these bodies, and then, oh, that's Shannon, we did a head from her, she lost a lot of eyelashes. And so, what next? Okay, so now we get all these bodies made. Now, luckily, the whole time that was happening, the tower was being built, so now how do we get them in space? Now we have all those 28 positions. Now we have to get them up there. 28 of them. And so I'm like, how do we place those? How do we get those in place? Well, luckily Warren made this animation Bible. Where's the animation Bible? Here it is. So this was this got us through, these are all the things we had for positioning all the bodies. And each one of these had a position in space for each one of those guys. And so you did this graph here, so we know that that one, like number 5, was going to be 9 feet 10 out from the center, and then like 9 feet whatever up from the top. So each one we knew where they needed to be. How do we get them there? Gimbals. Gimbals. So we had to make this whole crazy thing. So each one of those bodies, luckily we had already put these things inside to receive them. So each one of them had one of these that had arms coming out from the center and the bottom and the top that would pivot and swivel in space. You'd get infinite placement on your X, Y, Z axis and your yaw and roll and pitch. And I don't know if there's any aviators out there, but we had to come up with this whole language of just positioning all the bodies in space to get them in the right spot. Okay. So there it is in space, and it wasn't just easy as that. It was a lot of work. But so there's me and Karen there started. So then we had the top piece of the tower built. So then we started positioning all these things in space from those measurements of each piece. We only got to do 7 at a time, while the other 7 were getting hands and feet and heads put on them. So there was a lot of stuff going on at the same time here again. And Warren will tell you more about the refining process here. Yeah.
Thank you. So like, yeah, I know.
Moving around too much.
So like we did before, where we had to check the animation to make sure it animated well, we now had to make sure that as it spun, that whenever the strobe light went off, that the figure was in the right place for the strobe light. But the challenge was, as you see here, we don't have the entire piece. We have no electrical system. We have no strobe system. So there's no way to really know what the audience is going to see at a specific time. Well, that's not entirely true. We did have a system. But we really had to, lasers. Everything is solved with lasers. But it really is understanding how one frame relates to the next. And in animation, we do this with timing charts. And so we would draw all these measurements on the ground and use lasers to understand how the poses were animating in space over time. We had to make sure that they were always, they could rotate this way or this way, and they had to be consistent from one frame to the next. Hence the gimbal. But the real trick was trying to figure out how could we know when a strobe was going to fire and that the figure should be the place that it needed to be. So we marked, if you look down on the ring, there's like these little silver lines. And so we knew, based on where the sensor was, that that's where the strobe was going to go off. So we knew that if we put a laser on that line and spun it to that point, that that was the moment that the flash was going to go and that everyone could see it. So instead of having a strobe light, we used photography. We used a camera in the computer. More technology. And I used a stop motion software, so we would rotate it into place where the frame was, take a picture of it representing the strobe, and then rotate it to the next frame, took a picture of it, rotate it to the next frame, took a picture of it.
28 times.
And you could see the software up there. And so what we got back was this. And for each of those frames, we literally would spend hours like rotating it 1 inch this way, moving it up 1 inch that way. It was very laborious, but it really needed to do that so that all the frames could relate together and that the eye could follow it and see the story that Peter wanted to tell. So this was our first run of doing it, where she's running up. So we did that. And then the next sequence we worked on was the jump off. And this was really hard because we had to have these huge poles holding the figures up. So anytime we wanted to change one, we'd have to get either a tall ladder or a forklift and get up there. And again, at this point, we were literally moving these things within like 1 inch spaces just to kind of fine tune them.
I was kind of happy with it.
Yes. And then this was the final part, the swing through. And what's nice is you can tell that this is happening at the same time as all the other teams because you can see the head and hands and feet starting to appear.
in the middle of the tower too?
Yeah.
Came in?
So what's nice is that as we're figuring out all this animation and we know exactly where the figures need to be on each frame, all the other teams are doing the work at the same time. So at this point, We knew that the animation was going to play, and we knew where each figure needed to be on every frame. And then what's next?
Oh, wow. More! Oh, we're not done yet, sorry. Okay, so the next thing was getting those together. Now we have them temporarily in space, but then we had to physically, permanently attach them to the piece. So we had to come up with another system for doing that. And what I'd come up with for the top, which was the most a lot of the bottom pieces were just clamped on, it wasn't so hard. But the top ones are flying through space, there's nothing holding them. So we came up with this top hub that would hold all these arms off on the top to, once we got in place, to find a spot to weld this thing to get them in place. And this is what the top looked like without the bodies on it. And then we had this like sort of little suspension bridges cantilever out there to put the bodies on. And this is like late in the game. We're putting all these bodies on there, and I get the bodies on, and they're like bouncing and swaying and stuff, and I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, Allie, help! So I call Allie out, and I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I'm on my lunch break, and I get a call, and I'm like, hi, Peter. He's like, hi, Allie, can you come? I'm like, yeah, when? He's like,
Oh,
no.
I forgot to mention. This was the one thing that we didn't engineer.
Yeah.
And he's like, I will figure that out.
This was a last minute thing. So I go there and I check it out, and I'm gonna explain to you what was going on. So these figures are cantilevered, meaning that they are only supported one side, and as you lengthen this cantilever, it starts sagging, right? So what they did, like the crane, they put a line or a guy wire or wire to keep it from sagging, which that's what it does. However, when you start rotating this, it wants to go everywhere. So what I did, I bounded this I put 3 more guy wires on it, one from the bottom to hold it in place. They already have the top one, and I put one on the left, one on the
I
right.
didn't know about, because I just thought, oh, this is perfect, it's going to stay in place. I didn't realize it was going to.
It's gonna do this.
So that bottom one really made a difference to keep that in place, to keep it from going like that.
Yeah, so a lot of guy wires, people start cutting themselves, so I got the plugin name of guy wire. After that,
So there's all the guy wires. Oh great, this was like really late in the game, so we had to add all these cables in. Like I sent Scott, he went all over the Bay Area getting all the turnbuckles you could find. So putting all these wires on this thing and getting all these things. So each one of those had 4 wires here. You can see well, a lot of wires. You get the point. So then it was like, oh man, we got to get this stuff down and get it in a truck. So then we pull all the pieces off. Once you get everything all attached and figured out, pull them all down, sanding again, a lot more sanding, priming, and gold leafing. I was just going to paint them gold, but then we got some gilders in here and decided that we're going to gold leaf them. Not real gold, it's Dutch metal, it's called. But gold leaf them, that just made them pop, made them absolutely beautiful. But we didn't have time to pat ourselves on the back. It was get these things all patched up, get them on a truck, and get them out to the desert. So there we are unloading the trucks and getting all this stuff out there and building it. And this is just my amazing team out there. And this is a really fun, exciting part of getting all this together and just like seeing all this come together. It's pretty amazing. And there's me going, no, don't drop it. And you can see how big it is. When we built all that top on the ground with all the pieces on it, and they craned it up and put it on the top, lowered it down there, and bolted it all together. And then Warren tested out his animation again. And then, it's all going to work. And then there's the solar panels off here, and there's all the electrical stuff that we didn't really get time to talk about. But that's the piece all set up out there in the desert. And that's what it looked like. Those golden bodies that look great in the sun. And this is our first test before the sun went down, to make sure everything's working, the strobes are flashing. And then, as you saw before, then we got the thing finally worked after 2 years, all those things jumping and diving and flying off there. Yeah, 28 bodies, 24 months. So there it is, all up and running, and it took an amazing crew of people to make this happen. 145 patrols, I just want to thank them all. There was just like so much work and so much energy. It's so fun to have so many super talented, hardworking, just volunteers all working for free just to do it, to say they did it. So there's a bunch of the people that worked on this. So so grateful to all of them to make this happen. And besides them, all the people behind them that, oh, here it is. This gives you an idea, 100%, that's a lot of names. So this gives you an idea of how many people it took to realize that. Oh, wait. A lot of bodies, a lot of body work, But, so, there goes. They're all, a bunch of these people are out here. Hey, why don't you guys stand up, everyone that worked on this? Give them a hand. And to all the people that put up with these people. So that's my story. And so, right? Yep, time now. We've not working on a new project right now, but Warren and me, Warren and Allie have been working on a working scale model of Charon. And so I'd like to show this to you now. It's still in development stages, but it's a full-scale model of Charon that we want to make like a model kit so people can get it and build their own models of this. We just got the skeletons done. Warren did all the 3D modeling of these skeletons, and this is the piece that we did in 2011. And this is let's crank it up. Oh, can we bring the lights down?
Yeah.
So hopefully it's working.
Oh my god.
So this gives you an idea. Like video just doesn't put it apart. Like you really don't get it until you see these things in real life because they're so hard to videotape. But so I invite you all to come down afterwards and you can play with this. But we're hopefully going to have these made so you can have these in your own home. Any questions? Yes.
So you have any more ideas?
Yeah. Well, I've got a bunch more ideas, but I really. What?
I heard there was an Icarus story.
Maybe in the future, but really can't right now because these things like. We're looking to get these the pieces that you saw placed out in the real world, but for right now they're in containers and storage right now, so I'm trying to get those out. And I really don't want to take on a new piece until I get some homes for these pieces.
Stocky, you also know that Peter never tells what he brings
That's my first thing is I never tell them what
It's
I'm
always
doing.
a mystery, and I can tell you that there are quite a lot of ideas.
No,
Some of them a little intimidating, just like you. Any other questions?
Where's that piece now? Is it in storage?
That is in 3 containers in the Lego. Yes?
So you figured out exactly where the bodies should be, and then you had to take them off,
Yes.
and then put them back on with
Yeah.
the guy wire.
Well, the wire, like if you look up here,
Yeah.
like each one of those arms is coming out to a static position. So that's where it goes. I don't have to position it every time. But there is using those guy wires with turnbuckles or make them adjustable. So they did have some lateral play back and forth. If they weren't lined up perfectly, we could move them this way, and actually a little bit this way too. But those are hard, oops. Uh-oh.
Got it. So they were once they were positioned.
Yeah, those arms, each one of those have space, and a lot like the ones that were grabbing the ring, they just had clamps on their hands, so those were put in position there, and we had little spots to hold them, so they always put them back in the exact same place.
But I think that is one of the challenges of these pieces is they have to be repeatable. Like we have to be able to take it down, set it up somewhere, and have the animation be exactly in the right place.
Yeah.
So that's definitely an additional challenge and something that we have to take into consideration when we figure out how to keep the figures in a place for each frame.
because these pieces are getting shipped all around the world and to different festivals and museums. So the opportunity to bring them to a place is to also let us set it up as quickly as possible. So having everything ready to go is, a big challenge, but also an exciting part to build.
Yeah, it's a lot of parts. This one has more parts than any of my other ones, for sure. It's just mostly more cables than any of them.
So what advice would you have for someone who's trying to bring a
Don't do it. Find a home for it before you make it. If you want to do something like this, and that was like, when I went to Burning Man in '99, I had no idea how to do anything like this, and it's just so inspiring. Just to be inspired, like you could do that. It's like I didn't do that by myself. It took a team of people to do that. And inspiration is just the most important thing, just to see what other people can do and have done. And what would I say? Like, if you have an idea, you have to make drawings, make proposals. The first thing you got to do is you have to do a budget, figure out how much it's going to cost, figure out a schedule, how long is it going to take to do that. It's a lot of boring stuff. I actually I forgot about this. I brought a binder. Perfect thing. I didn't plant that guy either. You have to make this binder here that has first your proposal. Oh, we didn't even talk about Burning Man, really. There's Burning Man right there. All of these pieces, I got grants through Burning Man to make these. Unfortunately, these things cost about 3 or 4 times the amount that you get for a grant. So first thing you do is you make a proposal. You have your theme and inspiration. And you talk about what story you're trying to tell. And then, that's a contract. Then here's the schedule. You have to figure out exactly how long it's going to take to do all these. This is before you do anything. You have to figure all that stuff out. And then you put all these flowery words in there talking about the mythology of it. They love that. What's the meaning of it? Like, grammar scale. But then you just have to figure out how the hell am I going to make that thing, And so that's like, when I just started the first one, it was just me and a few friends. And as the things got bigger and bigger and more complicated, luckily, they came to me. It was just awesome. He comes like, yeah, you'll have people calling and say, hey, can I help you make your monstrosity? And, but you have to have a really good attitude and be lucky to be surrounded by amazing, wonderful, generous people to help you realize these things. So first, I would work on preliminary drawings and conceptual stuff, and as you get scaled up bigger and bigger, I would not start that big. I've always said, oh, think big, and it's like, maybe, it's good to think big, but you have to have the capacity to realize that, And, you guys have any advice on that?
No, I was just going to mimic your start small, right? Start small and build. I mean, it's like, make sure you can do something and understand the problems, and then start building that community. And I think that's one of the just to parrot what Peter said, I think that's one of the wonderful things is, I know when I first started working with Peter, just meeting his crew, like everyone I met were so talented in so many different areas, and I think it's that joining of everyone together that makes it really special.
So leave these out. When we're done here, you guys can come look at these if you want to play with that. I was going to say, I just thought something. I saw my mom back there. When we made the divers deeper in 2004, she came and saw that. And she meant this as a compliment, I think. She said, suddenly she says, Peter, what made you think you could do this? And I'm like, I don't know. We're just seeing what other people can do and have done. It's just so inspiring. It feeds on itself. And then that's the biggest gift I've gotten out of this is inspiring other people to create things and see what they've done. And like, okay, don't ask me what I'm doing next. What are you doing next? How are you going to blow me away? So that was the long answer. Yes, sir.
From the first solid concept of it through to what was finished, what were the biggest unexpected things, biggest surprises? And Are you satisfied with how the result compares to your initial solid concept?
Well, this one was a lot more challenging. Karen, the previous one, like that thing came to me in like literally like 5 or 10 minutes. I knew everything about exactly what it was going to look like. And this was much more challenging because I don't know why, that one I just saw it and it was there. This one, I knew the animation, but then I had to figure out all that other stuff about the tower and then changing it and stuff. The human drive had a lot of problems to it, and and the thing is you just run out of time. You're getting up, okay, we gotta get all this stuff together, all those components together, and then get it out there, and then every year, I can't think of one that we didn't have this, but we're fixing it all week long out in the desert. So you just have to be mentally prepared for that, like, okay, what's broke today? You know? So just deciding to do a different drive system rather than using the ones that already worked. You know, I wanted to do something different and new, and that was the most challenging. It's the most beautiful drive system. We just have some kinks to work out in that still, so I would say that was the biggest challenge to it, I think.
But you don't. So I was going to say, and you also bring out. I think you bring out one of the most complicated pieces. I mean,
Yeah.
this whole thing
More
has
and
to
more
be.
complicated,
This
yeah.
thing has to be entirely hand assembled on site. It has electrical systems, drive systems. It has the human drive, and it has. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of stuff into it.
And we
It's
didn't,
5 days, right?
Yeah.
You have to install it in 5.
we didn't even talk about the whole motor assist, which is a whole. There's a lot of technology that there was a motor that we had in case it wouldn't go fast enough, or people couldn't get it going fast enough, that would come in and help people add horsepower to this thing to get it going fast enough. And that is a very complicated piece, I'll put it that way.
And then there's a second part to his question, if you were happy with the outcome.
Oh my God, yeah. It's like, yeah, beautiful. Because like, I don't think there's one of these pieces that I made that I wasn't the person most impressed with it. Just like, what the? How did they do that? And I knew. I was like, wow. Yes, yeah. I'm very, very happy with how it
That's the
turned out.
crazy part. For most of these pieces, you may spin it once or twice if you're lucky, because again, we're working on a deadline. So you may spin it and put it all together once before we bring it up to Burning Man. But before that, you get out there and you just keep your fingers
not a lot of
crossed.
time in your word. We had to take that thing apart and get it in truck before we really got to put it to the test. More questions? Yes?
How much did all the materials cost, and then separately, like how much did people compensate?
So there was a few people that got paid. The CAD draftsman got paid to do this. Hiring professionals to do this, and had to be perfect, you know. And then the central core structure, I had a certified, fabricator do that. That's super dangerous. You don't want to. I mean, I have very talented people on my crew, but I chose to have a pro do that. Besides that, nobody got paid. I don't get paid. So this is all a labor of love, and it's like a lot of money up there. Like, so the I don't have the.
Yeah, we fundraised over 200. We get
Yeah,
we get
over
big
$200,000
grants,
to make
You
that
get-
in 2 years. Yeah.
amazing grants through Burning Man, through different proposals we put out there, but a lot of fundraising through events, through donors. Yeah.
That was a whole other thing I didn't talk about. There's a whole crew that just did fundraising and events and stuff just to raise funds to do this and fed us. Something else I didn't talk about, there's an app for that. There's a Hudson Vision, you look it on your iPhone, Hudson Vision, a daytime viewer, so during the day, if the strobes don't work during the day, right? So actually there's a viewer that you can look at during the day and you change the frame rate on the viewer and you can see the animation during the day. So that's a whole other thing. Forgot about that. Yes?
Do you still work at the opera?
No, I haven't worked, no. I've in 1996, I started working in film and TV and ads and stuff, so I do a lot more film work now than stage, and I still do sometimes, but I haven't worked at the opera. 96 was my last year there. Actually, I came back 1 year, 2003, so yeah, that was it. Any questions? Yes, way back there.
So if you weren't paid, were you working full-time while you were working on this as well?
No, I'm working every day. That's the horrible, I can't have a job. I can't, actually, I had gotten calls to do a job during Caron, and I took a week to go because I'm broke. Like, I go to work on this job, and it was like I couldn't, my phone was ringing, I'm getting texts and emails all day long from everyone else on the crew that are doing all these different things. And I just go, I can't do it, I can't, it's not fair to them, I couldn't give myself to the job, to the job I was getting paid for. But if I'm lucky, hopefully I'll save enough money and like on tax refunds and stuff. I'm always just like floating, right? I'm borrowing from Peter to pay Peter. I keep pushing myself forward. So right now I'm working without a net. So no, that's. I haven't figured that one out. I'm not very good at, I'm actually not bad at making money, but I'm better at spending money. So I'm not a businessman at all. I haven't figured that part out. I didn't make stuff. Anyone else? Yes, hi Stephen Raspa, how you doing?
First of all, I gotta say, it has been such a pleasure watching you, like, over the years, when you first brought the swimmers out and blew so many people's minds with that, and where you have taken things. And I gotta take my hat off to you and your entire crew, honestly, for so completely embodying not just the spirit of volunteerism, but collaboration and making mad visions, like, happen, and dealing with complexity in such an extraordinary way. And at the heart of it, you've become, like, the poster, one of the teams, the creative teams in our community that has really figured out how to work collaboratively to get these things done. And I suspect a lot of it has to do with your sense of humor and how fun to make it work.
They're not killing me, they're not walking away from me.
Why do your teams, year after year, have really loved working together so much and worked so well? What's sort of a secret to your collaborative success?
I'd just be really grateful, say thank you a lot. Let everyone know how much you appreciate what they've done for you, and I hope that I say thank you enough. And I am so grateful, but I think it's fun, isn't it fun?
I think the whole crew makes it a lot of fun.
It's not like going to work.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to all the meetings I had with Peter because I would laugh.
Does anyone in my crew want to speak to that? Nikki?
It's just so great to be a part of it and to look at it in the end and say, I had a part in that, and I helped create that. That's why we do it.
Yeah.
We laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Karen?
The summer I spent with you working on this, which was more than a full-time job.
She got me there early. So I'm going to pick you up at 9. Okay, so she got it.
I was motivated. Was absolutely the best time of my life. Just watching the magic happen and helping Peter realize his vision. That became all of our vision for that time. It was just.
I think that I give a lot of people their like they have their project, they own it, they have ownership of this art. It's not like Jeff Stump.
I'll just say, unlike other artists, Peter gives you a task and lets you be an artist, even though I'm not an artist, but I got to build a little tiny piece of it. So lets you have the ownership. So it's that personal ownership and then just the gratitude from Peter. And the fact is, he works you really hard, and then we really know how to have fun. Storms come up, work goes away, kind of go a little crazy.
But I don't let up till the thing's built.
But
There's no playing around till the day that thing's built. It's like, what do you got?
Yeah, the models, Heather and Charlene, we called that room the kill room. So it's like hard to say you want to go to work to go work in the kill room, but it ended up always being fun. And I think that that's a really good example of we could have had models built for that. We could have printed them, 3D printed them, put more money into it. But Peter really pushed for having us collaborate and come together, even though it took a lot of hours, but it made us family, and you'll meet people that you've never met before in different professions, different walks of life, and you have to come together to create this, and we have personal ownership, and you're really great at doing that. So.
And I think that I Sisyphus was a bicycle, and it was only out of necessity. I didn't know, how am I going to make this thing spin? It wasn't like, oh, I want to make this interactive, or people involved with it. It was just like, oh, how about a bike on the thing, and you get it going, and that turned out to be such a wonderful thing about the interactivity of it. And it turns out, I just thought of this just now, though, it's like, it's interactive building it. You know, it's not just interactive to experience art, it's an interactive process from when I called Warren. Saki.
One other thought, I too wound up full-time, I don't know how.
This guy came in there all the time.
I showed up and left 4 years later.
He was involved in the very beginning of the conceptual of that first design you saw. That was Stocky and I came up with that whole design there.
But one more thing is, Peter so deeply believes in it that you will truly follow him most every day.
I'm delusional.
Like his exuberance and belief in it, the passion there, you cannot help. People would come in and like, I saw the 150 volunteers. Let's say there was, maybe 50 of us that did the lion's share of it.
Yeah.
People would show up and like come in and instantly were just infected by it and just believed in it, and then yeah, I mean, it was all the hours.
Hey, Lish.
Hi. Yeah, just seconding you and Karen as well. It's just that exuberant inspiration that is so sincere. Yeah, that leaks onto everything around in the best way. And I think that pretty much everybody involved agrees that changed our lives in a way forever. Just to be a part of building something with so much inspiration and community and energy behind it, that those changes live on beyond that project.